I was reviewing my buddy's diversified portfolio the other day. 12 different funds, all handpicked by a financial advisor. It looked less like an investment strategy and more like a Cheesecake Factory menu. All I could see was a disaster waiting to happen. But here's the wild part. This is not uncommon. I see this all the time, from DIY investors trying to outsmart the market to advisors trying to justify their fat fees. And at the center of it all is one big lie. More effort means better results. But when it comes to investing, that mindset can cost you time, money, and peace of mind. Let me show you how and give you a better solution to this problem. In most areas of life, we're rewarded for working harder. You study more for a test, you'll usually score higher. You put in more hours at work, you might land a raise. Culture has trained us to believe that success is directly tied to effort for everything. But investing, that's a completely different game. In fact, the more effort you put into it, the more likely you are to screw it up. Take, for example, two different investors. Max is the pure definition of simplicity. He's got a 3-fund portfolio, something like a total US stock fund, an international stock fund, and a bond fund. He rebalances once a year, spends maybe about 15 minutes a month checking in, then goes and lives his life. His buddy Harry Houdini, on the other hand, has created what looks like a financial junk drawer. He's got 15 different funds made up of US large cap, mid cap, small cap, value, growth, a dividend fund, an emerging markets tilt, some real estate sprinkled in, and of course the inevitable fund he swears is the secret sauce. Harry is spending between 3 and 5 hours a week monitoring his portfolio, not because he has to, but because he feels like he's supposed to. Unfortunately, there's no guarantee that Harry will outperform Max with all of that extra effort. In fact, for the average retail investor, the odds of outperforming a simple 2 or 3 fund portfolio over 10 plus years by spending more time are low, like less than 20% based on studies of active management performance and retail trading behavior. He'll definitely be able to outperform every now and again, but consistently over long periods of time isn't very probable. That's not the whole story, though. Let's suspend belief for a second and assume that Harry, the magician he is, ends up outperforming Max by 1% every year for 30 years straight. Now, for some of you, that sounds like a lot, and that's because it is. It would appear that that extra effort worked out in Mr. Houdini's favor. But did it really? Let's do the math so we can see how this magic trick deceives even the smartest, well-educated individuals. They both invest $500 per month for 30 years. Max gets an average annual return of 7%, and Harry, with all of his extra effort and 15 funds, outperforms by getting an 8% average annual return. Max ends up with $566,000, while Harry ends up with $679,000, a $113,000 difference. Understandably, most people will just stop right there and say Harry is the winner and Max is the biggest loser. Unfortunately, this is all an illusion. Mr. Houdini doesn't want you to look a little too close behind that curtain. We need to ask ourselves how much effort Harry puts in every year to earn that extra $113,000. For an investor like him, the data says anywhere between 5 and 10 hours per week. But I want to be generous and call it 3 hours per week. As you can see, when you have a more complex portfolio, there are more things to do and manage. Plus, not to give too much away, it's about to get pretty embarrassing for Harry, so I want to be nice and give him 3 hours per week. Over those 30 years, Harry has spent a total of 4,680 hours to earn an extra $113,000. Max, with his more hands-off approach of 15 minutes per month, is only spending 90 hours. The hours Harry puts in through the extra effort comes out to be worth $24 per hour. Now, some of you might look at that and think that it was time well spent, since he ended up with $113,000 more than Max. Except Houdini's illusion has not been fully revealed yet. Let's say, for argument's sake, that Max wants to make up for that $113,000 that he's behind, but he wants to stick with his simple, hands-off, buy and hold 3-fund portfolio. In that case, he'll need to work more hours to earn just a little bit extra cash so that he can invest more every month just to catch up. I did the calculation, and Max will need to invest an extra $100 per month on top of the $500 he's already doing to have that extra $113,000 in 30 years. If we assume that Harry's extra time spent on his portfolio is worth $24 per hour, then let's assume Max will need to work an extra 4 hours at $24 per hour every month to be able to invest that additional $100 $100 per month. So let's tally it up over 30 years. Harry spent 4,680 hours managing his portfolio to earn an additional 1% per year and $113,000. Max spent just 90 hours managing and another 1,440 hours working extra to invest $100 more per month. That's 1,530 hours total for Max versus 4,680 hours for Harry. Harry worked nearly 3 times as much for the same result. This is what I like to call the illusion of effort. The belief that working harder on your portfolio by adding more funds leads to better results, when in reality, the opposite is often true. What's even more damning for Harry is that his 1% outperformance isn't guaranteed since it's out of his control. Now, Max, on the other hand, is in full control of earning that extra $100 per month. When your portfolio is more complex, it feels like you're being more responsible, like you're being more strategic, like you're in more control. But all that effort, it often leads to more mistakes, more stress, and ironically, worse results. And the worst part, we don't just fall into this trap on our own. Sometimes we're led into it. Now here's where things get a little more uncomfortable, because sometimes this whole illusion of effort thing doesn't start with you. Sometimes it's handed to you nicely packaged in a professional looking PDF, courtesy of your financial advisor or planner. I've worked with and heard from people who were given portfolios with 10, 15, even 20 different funds by their advisor. Heck, just the other day, someone commented on one of my videos telling me how an advisor put this person in 10 different index funds. And if they were asked why they were putting that many funds, they'd probably get answers like, "We want to make sure you're fully diversified," or "We're using a tactical strategy across market caps and sectors," or "This is a custom allocation tailored for your financial goals," or "If you want to outperform the market, then this is how we need to invest." All of that sounds pretty fancy, right? But if we're being honest, most of it is usually nonsense, because when you look under the hood, what you often find is duplication, complexity for the sake of appearance, and a whole lot of the same assets being repackaged in different wrappers. Any normal person would ask the question, why would an advisor do this? It's simple. They need to look like they're earning their fee. Complexity is job security in this case. They'll do the most dumb, unnecessary shit to justify their fee. If they put you in a plain 2 or 3 fund portfolio that's globally diversified, something you could set up yourself in under 15 minutes, you might start asking, wait, remind me again why I'm paying this person 1% of my portfolio every year? And you asking those types of questions isn't good for business. How else is he supposed to afford the $1 million home, the $100,000 car, private school for his kid, and the lip filler his wife swears she doesn't get? So instead, they build a portfolio that's complex and customized, even if it's just a bunch of funds that overlap with each other or track similar indexes. It's what I like to call portfolio theater. Lots of makeup and special effects, but very little added value. Thinking this is intentional is not crazy. Do not let them gaslight you. There's research that shows exactly how the game is played. One study called How Do Incentives Lead to Deception in Advisor-Client Interactions found that when advisors had incentives tied to specific products or strategies, they were more likely to recommend options that benefited themselves even if they weren't in the client's best interest. Another study, The Effect of Advisors' Incentives on Clients' Investments, showed that when advisors were paid commissions or fees based on assets under management, they often steered clients toward unnecessary complex investments. Again, not to improve outcomes, but to reinforce their own value. I have at least 8 more pieces of research that backs up this point. What's even more of a mindfuck is that most advisors aren't doing this maliciously. The studies found that a lot of this behavior is subconscious. They actually believe that they are helping you because they've convinced themselves that complexity equals professionalism. As Upton Sinclair wrote in his book 91 years ago, it is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. Now look, I am a big advocate for working with a financial planner, but only if they charge a flat hourly fee, because in those cases, incentives are better aligned with the client. But if you're holding 8, 10, 12, 15, or 20 funds, and you're not sure why you're in them or what half of them even do, there's a good chance someone's been selling you the illusion of effort, and you're the one paying for it. So let's take a look at my buddy's 12 fund portfolio I mentioned earlier, because this thing is a masterclass in what not to do. Here's the actual lineup and fees charged for each fund that was handed to my friend by his financial advisor. Keep in mind, this isn't just a problem with advisors and planners. Us DIY investors make this same sort of mistake as well. On the surface, it looks like there's something very sophisticated going on here, but once you strip away the labels, what you're left with is a bloated mess of unnecessary complexity. The deception that's going on isn't very obvious to the average person, but weirdos like me can recognize the major flaws. So let me walk you through them so that you can become better at spotting the red flags to avoid getting taken advantage of in the future. The first thing I like to look at is the fees. In this case, XOP and EFA are the only ones that are extremely expensive. My general rule of thumb is that if the expense ratio is higher than 0.10%, then we need to start asking questions. TLT is slightly above that threshold at 0.15%. Not too much higher, but we still need to start asking questions. And it's a good thing we did, because a quick Google search reveals that Vanguard has a similar fund that only charges 0.03%, which would save my buddy 80%. Surely there's a good reason that this professional investor is putting my friend in a fund that charges 400% more, right? Doubt it. VUG, VONG, VTV, and VONV all give you large cap US exposure. This is like ordering 4 large pepperoni pizzas from 4 different restaurants when you could have just ordered 4 large pizzas from one place. It doesn't make any sense to hold all 4 of these funds at the same time when you could just buy one fund like a total US stock fund that invests in all of these underlying stocks. To break it down even further, VTV and VONV both focus on large cap value stocks, but they track different indexes. They're two sides of the same coin, holding many of the same companies, which reduces your diversification and adds redundancy. VUG and VONG are both large cap US growth funds with slightly different indexes, but heavily overlapping holdings. So if you're holding both, you're basically doubling down on the same part of the market. Moving on to VO, this one adds mid-cap stock exposure, but guess what? So does VONG and VONV. VTWO and IJR both hold small cap US stocks. Different tickers with the same underlying stocks. There's no good reason to invest in both at the same time. This isn't a diversified portfolio. If anything, it's cosplaying as a diversified portfolio by layering the same exposure over and over again with different labels. This is what I like to call a human centipede portfolio. The same stocks are being recycled throughout the whole thing without any benefit. Then there's XOP, the energy sector fund. Now sure, sector plays sound smart, but when you're already holding total market style exposure through these other funds we just went over, you're doubling down on oil and gas for no reason. And based on how this person has constructed this portfolio up to this point, I don't think he has any business trying to get cute by adding an energy sector fund to try to gain an edge. Both IEFA and EFA track large and mid-cap stocks in developed international markets. Yes, they come from different issuers, but the holdings practically identical. Owning both just means that you're paying 2 fees and doubling the complexity to own the same basket of companies in Europe and Asia. No added benefit, just more clutter. Those are the obvious issues, but they're just the beginning. When you stack on too many funds, whether it's self-inflicted or handed to you by a professional planner, you start triggering a whole new set of problems you didn't sign up for. The first is trying to unwind a messy portfolio like this. For those of us who are still in the accumulation phase of investing, we're hard focused on building up our portfolio, yet never take into account how we're going to sell off this mess when it's time to retire and we need money to live on. Using my buddy's portfolio for this example, when you retire and need to start withdrawing money, which of these 12 funds are you selling from? Which ones do you trim first? Which ones rebalance automatically? Which ones have gains or losses you need to account for? It's going to be a pain in the ass trying to figure that out, especially when your portfolio feels like a Golden Corral buffet line. You'll either waste a ton of time trying to simplify it yourself, or you'll be forced to hire another scumbag advisor to clean up this mess. At that point, you're paying even more in fees just to make your money accessible. Sounds pretty stupid to me. Decision fatigue is also a byproduct of owning more funds than you need. More funds equal more decisions. More decisions equal more anxiety. And more anxiety means more mistakes. Every market shift becomes a reason to do something. Should I overweight small caps? Do I sell Europe now? Is now the time to rebalance those bonds? It creates creates this constant itch to tinker with your portfolio. And once you go down that path, you're not investing anymore. You're reacting because your critical thinking skills have been depleted because of all of these decisions you've decided to make with your portfolio. But decision fatigue doesn't just come from what's inside your portfolio. It also comes from everything happening outside of it. Because the moment your portfolio gets more complicated than it needs to be, you're way more vulnerable to distraction. Trends, CNBC headlines, a new ETF your friend swears by, Reddit portfolios, AI-powered strategies, and FOMO from everything happening in this weird financial world of ours. Every day becomes another reason to buy something new, sell something old, or spend 2 hours researching a fund that won't matter 10 years from now. You're not an investor anymore, you are a full-time financial juggler who gets paid in anxiety. So after all of this, you might be wondering what a good portfolio actually looks like. Here are 3 that cut through all of the noise and gives you everything you need. If you want dead simple, globally diversified, and set it and forget it investing that focuses only on stocks, you can buy just one fund. Something like VT, which is Vanguard's Total World Stock ETF. It holds over 9,700 stocks across US and international markets in one fund. That's it, you're done. One fund, one decision, no stress. You won't beat the market, but you will own it. And for 99% of people, that's a massive win. Want a little more control over the allocation breakdown? You can go with what I use for 100% of my money invested in the stock market, which is a 2-fund portfolio. It's typically a total US stock fund or S&P 500 fund like VTI or VOO, as well as a total international stock fund like Vanguard's VXUS. This combo gives you broad US exposure and access to global markets outside of the US, and you can adjust the allocation based on your risk tolerance or personal preference. It's simple, clean, globally diversified, no fluff, and something you'll never need to change. If you want to take it one step further, maybe you're closer to retirement or you want to smooth out the ride, go with the classic 3-fund portfolio. VTI or VOO for US stocks, VXUS for international stocks, and some sort of bond fund to capture the US bond market. This portfolio adds a layer of safety through bonds, which can help lower your volatility and give you the ability to rebalance when stocks drop. It's still simple, but now you've got basic defensive strategy built in. All 3 of these portfolios work for the same reason. They're easy to understand, they're broadly diversified, they're dirt cheap, they're easy to maintain, and most importantly, they make sticking to your plan a whole heck of a lot easier. You can also use these 3 portfolios as a baseline to compare to other portfolios out there. Since we know they give you broad exposure to the world stock market with minimal costs and complexity, they act as a benchmark for common sense. So if someone tries to hand you a portfolio with more than 3 funds, overlapping holdings, and fees that sound like a phone number, ask yourself, does this actually give me more or just look like it does? Because at the end of the day, investing isn't about looking smart. It's about building wealth in a way that is sustainable, low stress, and nearly impossible to screw up. And that's exactly what these simple portfolios do. If you want to know the financial industry's biggest lie when it comes to building wealth, then watch this video to your left next. Hit that like button before you go. I'll see you in the next one. Done. Molly, I love you, but you at my feet is just not working out right now. Thank you. I love you.